What do you do when your truth has been denied for decades? When the people who should have listened the most were the first to silence you? For me, it started in private therapy and coaching sessions, reading as much as I could, then practicing new tools I had learned in coaching and therapy with people who actually could hear me. Safe people. That's how I found my voice. Then I realized my story could help others find their voice, so keeping quiet wasn't an option anymore. Today, we're reflecting back on what it's meant to speak out loud after 40 plus years of being unheard, to tell my story, to validate others who have lived a similar experience, and to remind every ADHD scapegoat out there that your voice matters, even if the people who hurt you don't want to hear it. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy. As always, our conversations are based on lived experience, education, and trauma-informed insight. This isn't a substitute for therapy. It's a space for awareness and validation. It's wild that this is 1 year of the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast.
I know.
I'm proud of you.
I'm proud of you.
Hey, thanks. I've seen you go from being silenced by your family to standing unapologetically in your truth, and I know it hasn't been an easy or comfortable journey. Right? So let's get into why you started this and how it changed everything.
Okay. So after decades of not being heard, I decided to become the resource I needed. Like, I don't tell these stories hoping toxic people will finally, quote unquote, get it. They won't. I do this work so that others like me can see themselves, naming what's happening actually, and knowing that they're not crazy. This is what's going on, because they're being conditioned to believe that they are crazy and they are the problem. And in every episode, we center our discussions on awareness, understanding, and then taking action. So that's the work, and that's what helped me. And a lot of experts back this up, like Dr. Lindsay Gibson, who we've talked about before. She wrote the book on adult children of emotionally immature parents. And she talks about how children in these toxic families often internalize shame when their emotional reality is denied. And Chad, which is an ADHD resource, they highlight that ADHD adults experience higher rates of family conflict and invalidation due to emotional dysregulation being misunderstood as defiance. So even into adulthood as an ADHDer, it's looked at as intentional defiance, or, like a malicious thing.
Right. You're just trying to ruffle feathers.
Right. Instead of just
going with the flow.
Or just like them knowing, okay, that's your experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you're emotionally feeling right now. Like, that makes sense that you might feel that way. How do we deal with it with any tools? That doesn't happen.
Yeah. You mentioned before that you didn't find many resources talking about ADHD and scapegoating together. You came up with the ADHD Scapegoat. I think it's brilliant. What was missing, and how did it shape the way that you tell your story here?
Well, everything I had found either talked about, narcissistic families, or these, toxic family dynamics, or it was the stigma around ADHD that fuels misunderstandings, but not the combination of the two. Like, very, very few people have really talked
linked
about
it.
that. Yeah. So, those of us who grew up in these narcissistic or abusive family systems and are neurodivergent, we live that intersection every day. And I needed to name and validate that overlap, because from the emotional chaos, the people-pleasing, the being told we're too sensitive, dramatic, being misunderstood on purpose, and because of ignorance or stigma, right? That's why I needed to create this resource. There isn't a lot about it. And it doesn't mean that every ADHDer is a scapegoat or that every narcissistic family unit has a child who's neurodivergent, right?
Right. You kind of you've had a lot of people reach out and say a light went off when they heard your podcast. Oh my God, I think I was scapegoated because I have ADHD, or I have ADHD and I'm also the family scapegoat. I wonder if there is a connection. You've also had sort of the opposite, and kind of what you just touched on, which is you've had some people have pushed back, or one person in particular has pushed back and said, well, I acknowledge that my child is the scapegoat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she has ADHD.
Yeah.
Right?
Which it does. I mean, it doesn't.
Which is not what you're saying.
Right. The whole point is when we're talking about this, yes, they intersect. And there's some episodes where we'll just talk about ADHD, where we're not even including the abusive family system. Or there's some episodes where we just talk about the abuse and the trauma, and we don't talk about the ADHD. It's because, for me, those are both of my daily experiences, and sometimes there isn't alignment between the two. Sometimes it is one or the other that are really showing up in the situation. So, this is a space for any and all conversations, but really we're not, by no way have we ever said that if you have ADHD, you're the scapegoat, or even, because again, if you're in a healthy family, there are no roles.
Right.
It's just supportive. So since we went live on this podcast, I've faced the same tactics that, kind of silenced me growing up, which if you're the scapegoat of your family, you'll understand. But now I just have the names for these patterns of behavior, the rejection and the silent treatment when you do something that they disagree with or whatever. Smear campaigns and extreme verbal abuse, severe bullying tactics, including veiled threats and suicidal coercion. This is from an outsider. But all of these factors are why I waited to start my podcast until I felt ready to be able to get through those types of things, because I knew that they would come, right? And I wanted to make sure I was in a place that it wouldn't derail me. So doing all of that self-reflective work and reparenting myself, and I can now see these attempts at silencing me as confessions of guilt.
Yeah, you felt more prepared.
Right.
You felt like you were at a place where you were educated enough, you felt ready for the attacks that you knew would come.
Right.
And what we go back to all the time is kind of that playbook that the abusers are using. When you see the patterns, when you see those things, it's scary when you don't know, right? It's my own anxiety, it's fear of the unknown.
It's shocking.
Yeah, it's shocking because those are the people that are supposed to love and respect you and protect you. And so when the attacks come from within, when they come from the family, it's more shocking. It catches you more off guard and really puts you off track. And so you talked about a lot when you were a kid, you didn't have the language to necessarily explain how you were feeling or being treated in those situations. Well, the same can be true when you're an adult. And so doing this education, doing your research, the authors that you've connected with, and all of the family trauma research that you've done helps, protect you, fireproof you from those attacks. And just like when you were a kid, you had to grow up and learn, okay, this is what it was, this is how I was feeling, now I have the language to understand and describe it. You're doing the same in adulthood at 40 years old, and it has put you in a better place emotionally, physically, probably spiritually. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think there's this idea that when you dive deep into the healing work, the fear behind that is all the pain that's going to come up, and like people don't want to touch it because they know it's going to be painful. And it's hard when you're already experiencing this trauma, pain, or grief, or whatever it is, to see the other side of, that low point where you're seeing everything clearly and you really haven't moved past that. It's really hard to see the positive, that the positive will come, because it's never come before, especially if you're a childhood trauma survivor. It's not like getting back to feeling better again. You never felt good. So a lot of that is scary for people. And I think, me being on the other side to a certain extent, I'm not healed. There is no, that does not happen. I'm continuing to heal, but I'm further along in I hate saying healing journey. I don't know why I hate saying it, but that's really what it is. Like, I'm further along in that, and I have seen the positives that it's so nice to be shocked by the pleasant and peace that comes with that. Yeah. Like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I have so much peace, and that could have been there, right? Mm-hmm.
But you're thankful that it is now.
Right. And it's just moving through all of this stuff. And the fact that someone would try to silence me, and when I say confessions of guilt, is them saying like, why would you want to silence someone from healing? Like, they don't like that I'm telling the story because they're not ready to even live in the reality of their own. And I'm not expecting anyone in particular to listen, but I do know that speaking the truth about a difficult experience can make space for that healing. And maybe by us talking about this and, sharing this, we'll empower someone else to feel safe telling their story too. And not necessarily on a podcast or on TikTok or in that type of public way, but speaking up and talking to those people close to you, or talking to someone about it, sharing something, and not just holding it all inside. And I've talked about Dr. Ramani a ton, but another expert point on here is she talks about, all the gaslighting and the, secondary abuse that comes along when you speak up and you speak the truth, because that will trigger the narcissistic systems, the people in those systems, to attack. And there's a really good blog on Psych Central. We'll share the link in the show notes, but it's from Shahida Arabi, and she's the Self-Care Warrior on Instagram, and she puts a lot of great stuff out there. But she talks about, in this article, about how society gaslights survivors of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, and talks about all the minimization and how much harm it caused. So go and read that. We'll share the link. It's really
a must read.
I mean, as I'm reading through it, I was like, But if you haven't been doing all of the extensive work that I've been doing, it might be just an eye-opening and like, oh no, I was doing that without realizing it.
I think we should pause right now so I can go read it.
If you want.
No, it's all right. Wait. I feel like I'm doing healing by proxy through you. I'm not doing all of the work. I'm having conversations with you about the work that you're doing and learning through you. So,
but then you are doing things on your own after that, though. It's almost like, and that's kind of a healthy, safe relationship dynamic, is, when one person's struggling, the other one kind of, pulls in a little more supportive, a little more protective, in that way. But like, to be able to share these things together and be honest and open up something, because maybe something I share with you sparks something that you were like, oh, I never thought of that. And now I'm gonna check that out and follow that rabbit hole. And then we come back and we're learning from each other through just being open about the reality of these things.
Yeah. But I think it's also good to encourage people who are considering diving deeper into their trauma and scapegoating or even just ADHD. I think that co-education is important for support. Just like with ADHD coaching, right? You can coach a child with ADHD, but if you're not also coaching the parent, then the child doesn't have a support system.
Right.
And I think the same goes for the narcissistic abuse and scapegoating abuse. I think it's important to have a partner that you can talk to about these things and lean on and bounce ideas off
anybody.
of.
One other person that understands and validates and also is curious in your conversations. Yeah, it's important.
Well, it's hard because the threats and that silence are real.
Right.
You're not making up the cost, but you're saying it's still worth it.
Right. And that's exactly what it is. Silence actually costs more. I know there's this temporary, I don't know, I want to say relief, but there's this temporary response, you need to be silent. And, I stopped talking because I was wasting my energy talking to people that wouldn't listen. But it's also silence can be a self-protective time, and it's necessary. So I'm not saying silence isn't also important, but silence in the long run. Silence when your gut, your intuition, your whole body is telling you you should say something or something's not right. That costs way more because it's harder to come out of, it's harder to heal from. You don't owe anyone your silence. And I think that speaking up with self-respect and setting boundaries, that's one of the things as a child I didn't have the verbiage for, but I always set boundaries. I was like, no, that's not okay. And I always did that without knowing what it was. But having self-respect, setting boundaries around anyone who has access to you, just doing those things, knowing you deserve self-respect, knowing that your boundaries matter, they're for your protection. It can light a fire inside of you that empowers you to never let anyone mistreat you like that ever again. It just does. So some people may never speak up, right? And the people that I've had to go no contact with will probably never change from my speaking up. But I speak up for my own personal healing and to give those who can't speak up yet a voice, to validate them, period. Right?
Right. It's important.
So another thing, talking about ADHD as an adult, especially in women, it still makes people uncomfortable. It's so weird, but it still does. And if you add family abuse to that, people act like it's too heavy or, again, too much, or even to the point where people are like, this is unbelievable, because the way a narcissistic person or the system as a whole works is unbelievable. It's so ironic that they call you crazy because everything they do is crazy.
That's why it's so unbelievable, because
right.
It is so crazy that someone on the outside, especially if it's happening within a family, is like, why would someone in your family treat you like that? That just seems absurd. Why you must be making this up.
Right. Oh, this is unbelievable. This is too much. But it's we're not here on this podcast to make anyone comfortable. It's these narcissistic family systems and the enablers, all the flying monkeys or whatever. It's your house is tipping over with the amount of shit you're trying to sweep under your rug. Stop. We're here to tell the truth, whatever that looks like. Just own it. Wake up.
Yeah, I think that probably resonates with a lot of listeners. The feeling that you're being labeled negative or dramatic for describing your lived experience.
Exactly. Like, they confuse honesty with negativity, which we've talked about, the toxic positivity episode. But, like, naming the harm isn't negative. It's living in reality, becoming more aware, growing your understanding of what's keeping you stuck. Because sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint, especially when there's trauma and you haven't figured out all the parts. Like, there's stuff that I still uncover and I'm like, oh, I think this might be, and I follow the thread. Mm-hmm. But like, me or anyone else in an abusive relationship, the reality is not bright and sunshiny and rainbows, and it's really bleak. But if we're talking about this and speaking up about it, that's not us bullying or being manipulative or being abusive. I'm not harming anyone. Am I ruining the plans of abusers to be able to control and abuse someone else? Hopefully, right? Talking about what they said and did, my feelings and the impact it had on my life is not and will never be abuse. So when they try to silence you, they act like you're creating a smear campaign, harassment, defamation, slander. That's all projection. Mm-hmm. And it's laughable. Right? Like,
yeah, I was thinking that earlier. I think that you going on this healing journey has upset a lot of people because it's interrupted the status quo of she's the scapegoat, she's the whiner, she's the one who we put all of our troubles on, and you're taking back that power, right, and saying, I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore. That forces people, you're not forcing other people to deal with their issues.
I'm not controlling anything. It's
right.
Just
you're
it's the mirror.
It is. You're holding up the mirror and you're offering resources in which some of these other people in your family could look at themselves and go on their own journey. Mm-hmm. But they're so unwilling to do it that right. You've become enemy number one. They're offended that mm-hmm. you would heal your trauma. Right. Which is...
Owning my story isn't selfish. It's self-respect. Yeah. I spent years over apologizing and blaming myself and trying harder to earn their love and understanding. Like, they just don't understand. I really thought that in the beginning. Like, if they just understood me, or if they understood that this hurt me, they wouldn't do this, you know. But what bothers these toxic and abusive people is the fact that I have self-respect. Like, why? Acting like I'm mean for sticking up for myself, or meddling for calling out abuse. Make it make sense, right? I think it shows how much they don't want to hear what I'm saying, because then they would have to do something about it. And doing something about it would include them taking some accountability for the part they played in the harm that was caused, and they just cannot face that shame. It's either I don't want to deal with it, or I don't know how to deal with it, but it's making me uncomfortable, so I'm not going to deal with it. To me, that's just weak and lazy. Yeah. They label me selfish and crazy because I have the guts to stand up for the truth.
I mean, you're meddling in their abuse. That's what they're upset about. That's why they call you a meddler.
Right. Yeah. I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
That's where the comfort zone is for them.
Right.
And you're disrupting that.
Right.
How dare you?
Yeah. Always putting their comfort over your own is you're harming yourself doing that. And I know there are dangerous situations where you have to do that. It's survival. Mm-hmm. Lived in survival for so long. breaking out of it is wonderful. Another expert tip here from Dr. Brene Brown, who I love so much. She writes about sharing our stories with boundaries. That's how we transform that shame that we may carry into connection. But sharing them in unsafe systems only deepens the trauma. She gives this really good story about, talking to her daughter about this jar where, I want to say it was marbles. Now I'm blanking on it. But she talks about this jar and, like, who do you trust with your jar of information? Like, if you give it to that friend, are they going to share it with another friend? Are they going to be gossiping? Are they going to use it against you and stuff like that? And so she talks about who you're sharing things with and how to protect yourself from people that aren't going to listen or aren't trustworthy or don't care. And I shared with my family of origin because they must love me. We're family. That idea, right? And it was very unsafe. And it caused me more trauma. I was a child, and even into adulthood, I thought that they would grow up and do better.
Do better, understand you, take care of you.
Yeah, just like
listen.
And that's the part of a lot of ADHDers expect others to treat us the way we're treated, and we're floored when they don't care as much as we do. That's something I had to learn, right? And as an ADHD coach, I understand the exhaustion of masking and people pleasing as a trauma response. It drains our energy, it takes away from our self-worth, and it's something we have to actively work on.
Yeah, it's not about revenge or exposing anyone. It's about releasing yourself from silence.
Exactly. And that's part of the healing process. There's a lot of different images that are shared on social media where they talk about, all of that emotional weight you're carrying, it gets heavy. Mm-hmm. And they'll show a character like having all these boxes or all these boulders on their back and stuff. And that's what it is. It's you holding things in, keeping secrets, staying silent to protect the abusive people. These toxic people will say that we're seeking revenge when we're just seeking justice for the truth that's been silenced with it.
Yeah, it's like the strong sister in Encanto, when she literally loses her strength because she's carrying the weight of the family and the magic of the family for so long by herself, essentially.
Louisa, donkeys.
Yeah, she can't carry, like, she couldn't move a single donkey because she lost, it was weighed so heavy on her.
Yeah.
It just, that strength dissipated, and it was like, I can't do it any longer.
Yeah.
She had to talk to someone about it.
Oh God, Encanto.
I think we should just do a whole episode on Encanto.
Oh, I would.
Family roles.
I've cried so many times watching that movie. It's such an amazing depiction of family generational trauma and scapegoating and just all the roles. It's so good. So if you haven't seen Encanto yet, go do it. But yeah, it's like we're looked at sometimes, well, me, as seeking revenge, or, I'm slandering someone's name or something. But if someone gets exposed because they've been harming others, good. Like, we talk about doing the hard work of healing, and these people are so emotionally immature that they think they're entitled to your loyalty or access to you or to treat you however they want, that you need to go to therapy and seek resources for understanding. But as their life is like blowing up, they're just going around playing the victim to anyone who will listen. Do you think they're going to therapy or seeking information? No, they aren't. Speaking truth is kind of like an apology to myself for giving to my detriment to these people who didn't care. Who, you know, at one point I thought maybe they didn't care as when I was a kid, for whatever reason. Like, I have empathy for what they went through, you know, how their families treated them, things like that. And even my siblings, I knew we were all growing up in survival. You know, even when I was being harmed by a sibling, I knew what I saw when he was being scapegoated. And so even though he was horrible to me, I was still empathetic and was like, we'll grow up and we'll get along and we'll be there for each other at some point. But it's not just like they didn't care before. They still don't care now. And that's what became so obvious when I understood my ADHD. That's how I figured out that I was in a narcissistic family system, was because that part where you're like, they didn't care, or they didn't understand, or they didn't get it, and they still don't. What's that about? You know? And here's the thing. I know I'm too much for some people. That's fine. I've never had a problem with that, really. I'd rather be too much than too silent and allow someone else to be harmed, or to allow myself to be harmed. And that's not for everyone. My honesty isn't negativity. I'm not a negative person. I'm not, I don't know, a droopy Darla. It's a Debbie Downer. But yeah. Me and my high school buddy always used to say droopy Darla. Just, I don't know why. I probably tried to get the name right and I messed it up. And just...
Or you were trying to trademark your own...
I think I messed it up, and so then we just went with it. But anyway, negativity, when you're talking about something bad that's happening, that's not being negative. That's being clear. That's clarity. So if someone is saying that to you, huge red flag. Hold up. Full stop. No, I'm not. Something bad just happened, and I'm explaining it, right? My emotions, like the fact that I'm a highly sensitive person and I show my emotions, or, you know, I listen to my emotions and try to figure out what they're telling me. That doesn't make me weak. They're evidence that I still care, that I'm invested, that connection matters, right? And that was always mocked. It's mind-blowing. But I believe that in every situation, that in order to grow, in order to have growth, it requires truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Mary Toulin, I think that's how you say her name. She's the Scapegoat Child Recovery Instagram account. She has a great post about how many excuses that we make for them. We'll also link this in the show notes. But she gives a quote that says, "Facing the truth is painful, and so is remaining in denial." But she lists, on her post, I just want to share, because sometimes reading her posts, because it's Scapegoat Child Recovery, every single thing she writes matches me. It's nuts. But in this one, where she talks about making these excuses, just listen to some of these quotes. In their mind, they really think it's funny. They just can't see that it hurts me, right? That's just their way. They don't really mean it. Perhaps for my wedding, they'll surely be kind and show respect for me then. Where's this next? As long as they're not too horrible to me, I can cope with it. I'm strong. I just want to be part of the family. Ouch. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like constantly just trying harder and harder and harder to fit whatever this mold is And it finally came to a head with this outside person that, oh, there never was a finish line or an end zone. The goals kept moving.
Instead of this outside person, you know, to a more extreme, in a more extreme way, bringing more of that negativity and abuse in, and your family going, whoa, 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 we're a family. What are you? But back up. Right. And protecting you, they were like, come on over. Hold on. Let me tell you how to really get at her.
Right.
And really, like...
It's sick.
Twist the knife.
Yeah. And I know we talked about in the episode of Toxic Positivity, but Whitney Goodman from the Calling Home podcast, she's authored a book called Toxic Positivity. And she talks about how true optimism acknowledges pain and seeks repair for that pain. Denial is what keeps people stuck.
Mm-hmm. Huge point to make, that real optimism actually sits with the pain and seeks repair. And that's a supportive connection, right? Yeah.
And Dr. Russell Barkley, he's one of the top ADHD psychologists and experts. He says that emotional intensity in ADHD isn't dysfunction. It's sensitivity to injustice and connection. It just needs safe spaces to exist. And that's a part of like, oh, you're Angie Weiner, too dramatic, but it's, no, those sensitivities are our connection to other people. They're important. They matter.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this podcast really special. It's honest, but it's not bitter. Yeah. You don't sugarcoat, and you also don't lose hope. And that balance, it's hopefully what keeps people coming back.
Right. And go.
You said, I'm too much for a lot of people. I'm too emotional. You're not enough for me. I love your big emotions, and I love how caring you are.
Well, I think that's the thing too, is like we talked about it before, where I've said, save it for the proposal. You're being too nice. Like
I'm not proposing again.
I was always like, oh my gosh, like, is he for real, or is he going to use this against me? Like, I had a really hard time trusting your genuine love for me. And that's hard. It's hard when you just come from such a toxic place. And that's why it's hard, I think, for some people to see red flags when they come from this, because it's normalized. But I think that when we're talking about, like you said, not being bitter, but just not sugarcoating, being honest, like anger comes up when you see everything clearly. Like, how could it not, right? When you realize that all these negative beliefs, especially when I was going through my ADHD coaching and being like my program, and now I use it in my coaching too, but like, where are these negative beliefs coming from? They're actually the voices inside your head of all of these people, because you were told you were too much over and over and over. And you just carried it with you, just assuming that everyone, if your family thinks those things, everyone else is going to. So it's about turning that anger and using it as fuel to empower you to move forward. That's what makes a healthy anger. Like, your gut, your intuition is telling you when you're being harmed. That's what your anger is saying. So you have to look at where it's leading you. And if it's, oh my gosh, I'm being abused. This is not okay. I'm being harmed. They are treating me with complete and utter disregard. There is no basic human decency even. It's time to go. Mm-hmm. And another part is sadness, not just the anger, but the sadness will also be a big change maker if you let it. Like the grief that comes from healing and doing this work, it's a huge component. And I look back and think of what like younger me deserved but never received. Like the way I treat my kids, the way I talk to them, the ways in which I support them and walk them through hard conversations. I didn't get that. And on top of that, not only did I not get that, I was punished and blamed for things I didn't do. I didn't deserve any of that. And I realize now that sadness is how much I missed out on by having to figure out all this stuff on my own. The ways in which, you know, I needed to comfort myself because I had no one to go to. And I created these make-believe scenarios and lived inside the movie Annie, and I talked to imaginary friends just to not let it crush me silently. And I also realize how the sadness also comes with that realization how truly abusive these people had been and how they're continuing to be. And being my family or, you know, otherwise, when you're going through the healing process and you're doing the work, you look back on certain experiences with a new lens, obviously, because we'll say it 9 million times, but once you see it, you can't unsee it, okay? So there is a different lens. Your awareness is clear, and it completely changes your outlook in a good way, mm-hmm. in a healthy way, in an empowering way. And when you're no longer living in survival and trying to hold it all together, like, you'll be able to see things clearly. You know, from the maliciousness of some of them to the utter disregard for me as a human being by others. It's devastating. It is sadness. And due to their level of unconsciousness, just going through the motions, or their complete lack of attempted repair, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't hold out hope that I will see a day that they'll do the work needed for any type of repair or a time where I can even trust them again, right? My hope is more geared toward those of us who are seeking authentic change for the greater good, for a healthier, you know, if you don't come from a healthy family, make the family that comes from you healthy, right? I hope that my kids will know their worth and speak up for themselves and speak up for others. I wouldn't be a coach or put my heart and soul into this podcast if I didn't have hope. I just don't have any hope for those who have harmed and betrayed me, because they've shown me who they are, and I believe it.
Well said. 1 full year later.
Wow. Yep.
This space has become what it was always meant to be.
Yep. Thank you.
Proof that telling the truth is worth it. That being silenced doesn't mean that your story's over. Right.
And it's funny because I've talked about not loving compliments, and any of you ADHDers or scapegoats get that, right? Hard to accept compliments, hard to celebrate anything. You're much better at celebrating me, and I appreciate that. I'm still uncomfortable with it. And I'm like already like, okay, I don't want to celebrate it, or, you know, of course I'm being selfish or, you know, arrogant if I toot my own horn, but I am proud of us. And being consistent is something that's really hard for ADHDers, but when it comes to something that we're interested in, because we have an interest-based nervous system, that consistency is not hard. This is proof of that, right? So as we move into our second year of the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast, we're digging deeper, having hard conversations, continuing to expose the scapegoating patterns, growing awareness and understanding around these issues that actually matter in our lives, and of course, still finding space for tools, healing, and laughter along the way. So to kick off next week, we're going to be asking, what would you do? And I'll be sharing some of the threats I've personally received and talking about how you might respond if you or someone you cared about were on the receiving end of that kind of attack. And we'll also be sharing resources to help you stay informed, safe, and supported if you ever find yourself in that situation. Anything you'd like to add?
Just one high five.
Woo!
Because I'm proud of us.
Yes. Awesome. So cheers to 1 year of exposing lies, speaking truth, and bringing awareness to the hidden realities of ADHD trauma and the scapegoat experience. To every truth teller who's been there since the beginning of this podcast, or you just found us today, thank you. Thank you for listening, learning, and healing with us. We'd love to hear what you want us to dig into this coming year, as well as jump on, like, and subscribe. Leave a review and come back next week. Until then, stay curious, stay clear, and keep telling the truth.